Hi everyone, this is audap, and oh crap, I'm feeling depressed. So, um, let's uh, let's play some depressing games. This is Narcissu. On a blindingly bright day, on that very winter, 2001, from the July 2000. Oh boy, this is fast. Spring 1996. Sutsumi. True, I wasn't a very healthy child. Wasn't very healthy ever since I was a child. Even so, I attended an elementary school like all the others, and during summer breaks, I often played until I was utterly tanned. June, shortly after my entry into middle school. The day after I had ordered a swimsuit for use next month. Boy, that music's really loud. My first hospitalization. On a day just like before the first semester midterms, on a day when the first drops of rain were so cruelly cold. Falling from mist, the pure white of the overcast sky. Of course, the first time it happened, all my classmates came to visit me almost every day. And when I was released, they even came to my house on weekends to play. But that was only the first time around. Autumn into winter, winter into spring, a vicious cycle. Hospitalization, release, clinics, and hospitalization again. And before I knew it, even the classmates I once called friends turned into acquaintances, and then into strangers. As if with every changing of seasons, I was being erased from their collective memory. It seems like to all those normal people, my very existence was an unpleasant fact. And so, it looks like I've been erased. I spent so many seasons, so many white overcast skies, without the want or need to converse with anybody. For that matter, my English textbook has never changed from that of a first-year middle school student before the first midterms. That is where my time seems to come to an end. Okay, I'm sorry. Wow, that's super loud. I can't even hear anything. 8 years later, early summer 2004, protagonist. Summer, flowing sweet. The gigantic electronic scoreboard in the driver's license examination facility lit up all at once. My eyes and everyone else's lit from our respective numbers. 237, 237. And of some 8 columns of lit text, sure enough, my examination number was shining in the midst. A nearly empty train car, perhaps thanks to the beautiful afternoon. Almost alone in that train car, I was heading back home from the examination hall. My left hand held a new traffic regulations handbook, and my breast pocket held my brand new driver's license. So, now I've got a license as well. I muttered something happily, but there were no strong feelings behind it. I never particularly wanted to drive a car, never particularly had any motive for it. It was just that my colleagues and the Technical Institute both recommended that I at least get a driver's license. That night, when I told my parents I'd gotten my license, they merely replied with a, "I see." And when I asked if I could borrow the car, just for a test run, they instantly and curtly said just one thing: no. While I didn't really want to drive the car or anything, the response was all too expected. Those were my parents for you. The next day, I woke with a chain in my chest. I woke with a chest pain and went to the hospital. Sickness and I generally had nothing to do with each other, which is why I found the ER waiting room to be so utterly boring. And just when I thought they were through examining me, they ordered an x-ray and some blood tests, then they left. And again, I was left waiting for a long, long time. I'd already polished off 3 volumes of Shonen Jump and was just about to start on a 4th when they admitted me to the hospital right then and there. And it seemed that my new license, which still lay snugly in my breast pocket, would have to wait a long time for its turn to come. Protagonist, Autumn 2004. Right around the time when the all too noisy cicadas had finally gone silent, I once again find myself in the hospital, as per usual. Of course, it wasn't as if I'd been there the entire time. I came and went, futile cycle. My first surgery was a month before. After that, I started doing the 5-minute commute to and from the hospital by moped. And from then on, I was hospitalized, discharged, ordered to a clinic, and hospitalized again and again and again. While I still have no clue what PET or ERISA stood for, in no time at all, several months had already passed. As my appetite decreased, my medications increased. I could feel my own physical strength atrophying away. I kept imagining that my legs were getting thinner. But the needle of the weight scale rudely informed me, it's not just your imagination. And yet I kept looking at myself with detached interest, as if it were happening to somebody else entirely, as if I were looking at a scene on TV or the like. My mind could not grasp what had so suddenly happened to my body. Nothing within me was telling me that this was real at all. And that's why, even though it was all happening to me, I kept looking on as if it were happening to someone far away. A day of winter, around when the Christmas trees had vanished from the streets. I was discharged home as a kind of year's end treat. It seemed like an exercise in total transience, but still, it made me slightly happy. I traveled back to a home I had not seen in a long time in the midst of a freezing rain. Strangely enough, my entire family was there. My parents, who had never so much as talked to me, came out to meet me, as if with terribly stilted smiles. And my little sister, with whom I'd never had a pleasant word, had made my favorite cream stew and fried shrimp just for me. They made me sit at the table. They peeled tangerines for me. They were cruelly kind. It was an impressive display. At this point, a little thought occurred to me about my new driver's license, which was still stuffed away in my pocket. That perhaps things would end for the license without it ever having known any use. And surrounded by a trio of stilted, strained smiles, I kept that thought as if it were somebody else's business, with dispassion, ambiguity, and total disinterest. January 2005. A new year began, and I returned to the hospital. But on this day, instead of my usual 4F room, I ended up in a conference room of sorts. They took me there. And then, my father and the doctors had a little talk. I joined in. Well, they talked to me. So this was their so-called announcement. They said it in a terribly roundabout fashion, but they told me that I was going to die. I see. That was my only reply, I had no other words. It was the only thing that left my mouth from beginning to end. And the doctor's ballpoint pens flew across paper as if in response to my words. Those were probably hospice enrollment procedures, business to the last. My father was the same. So, it's this simple, was the only real thought I had. That day, I was transferred from 4F to 7F, from a 6-person room to a private room. It was a little different from the other wards this 7F. First of all, the floors were sparkling clean, and second of all, the ceiling was higher than I'd ever seen. The rooms were very nice and had large windows from which the warm daylight streamed in as if by design. But the windows only opened a little. I tested them out, and my head would just barely fit out of one. The color of my ID bracelet had changed as well. The bracelet that I had worn ever since the first hospitalization, the one that had my name and blood type recorded on it, its color had now changed from blue to white. A high ceiling, a white vinyl bracelet, a window that would not open more than 15 centimeters. The TV program celebrating the new year was still playing when I was transferred to this 7F. And it was at the dawn of that very year that I met her for the first time. Narcissu. Winter 2005, 7F. There was this place, kind of like a lounge at one side of the corridor, across from the nurses' station. This generally deserted place held a few couches and chairs, as well as a large TV. Stupid programs commemorating the new year were still being broadcast on that 28-inch screen. There was a girl who looked absolutely bored watching that absolutely boring TV. Short, in pink pajamas, a white bracelet on her wrist, just like mine. Impressively long hair that almost reached down to her hips. Hey, do you find that interesting? There was no deep purpose in the asking, simply I had nothing else to do, so I started talking to her. Not really, was her only reply to me. She didn't turn to face me at all. And she kept looking on with boredom at that TV as if I didn't even exist. Then don't watch it. Even as I thought this, I sat down in a chair next to her. And side by side we watched TV. Nothing else to do. Nothing we could do. So we sat there silently and watched TV. New Year celebration programs as per usual, a useless array of comedians and oddities. And every so often, the MC's stupid shrill laughter resounding dryly in his white sun-drenched lounge. Say, tell me. The girl suddenly started talking to me, but her eyes were always glued to the TV screen. How many times is it for you now? What do you mean by that? How many times have you come here to 7F? Sorry, I have no clue what you're talking about. I see. So, it's your first time then? So, she'd seen my confusion about her question and come to the right conclusion. Then, since there's no one else around, and since it's my duty... Duty? There's this rule. Nodding slightly, she explained that the rule was that someone here should tell newcomers the truth. I knew nothing. I understood even less. And as if I did not exist, she slowly started her speech. Then listen closely. Her words, spoken methodically, one by one, were a little different from all the ones I'd heard from the doctors about this place. In their business-like, crisp syntaxes, they told me, this is a place where one waits for medical advances. This is a place where one heals one's heart, and perhaps they may have been correct in a general sense. But according to the girl, that was just a party line. The truth was that this 7F was the only place in the hospital where medical treatments did not take place. This is just a place where you waited for your life to come to an end. Those were her words to me. I thought so as well. I felt it even before she'd spoken. See, this is my second time. Second time doing what? Coming here. And then she explained it to me. That nobody on 7F stayed here from initial hospitalization all the way until death. While there was zero possibility of being cured, you were sent home if your condition was stable. But if it worsened again, you would return here. That cycle ended only in death. Whether it was home or here on 7F, always one of the two, you were going to die. No way to escape it, it seemed. And with that meaning permeating her every word, she informed me that this was her second time up here. I'm only going to say this once, so listen closely now. She continued speaking, all the while staring at the blank TV screen. This wasn't idle chit-chat about the lights out, or when the lights out was, or where the kitchen was, or anything like that. This was something completely different. The third time you are discharged home, resign yourself. There won't be a fourth time. You will never go home again. If you ever want to escape, head towards the B station, not the A station. Eat nothing. This is the simplest shortcut. You leave the smallest burden on your family that way. It was as if she was packed to the brim with matters like those. This was probably an oral tradition, relevant only to those who were going to die, and kept by those who came here for that purpose. So, is this the duty that you were talking about? Yes, that's right. So, do you remember to perform it for a newcomer yourself someday? Okay? With those words, she slowly stood up. She callously tossed her long hair, and it grazed my nose. I have to go get my temperature measured, so... Then she turned her back and started walking down the corridor. Now completely deserted, save for me, the lounge held only the laughter from the TV and white flowers by the windowsill. In the end, she didn't even look at me once. A few days later, New Year's celebrations were over, and in the middle and high school students were beginning a new term. And just as ever, she and I sat in this lounge, staring blankly at the TV. This is boring. So it is. So we said, but both of us kept our eyes on the screen. Hey, is this place always this way? I don't understand what you're getting at. I'm getting at how it's always deserted. Other than the nurses, doctors, and help staff, and the other her, I've not seen a single person. Did everybody go home for the new year or something? Do you really want to know? Well, I didn't mean... Then I won't tell you. We, who disinterestedly tossed back and forth this exchange that could not even be called a conversation. A slight breeze coming from the window that would not open more than 15 centimeters. From time to time, her hair would sway, as if in agreement. The flowers at the windowsill would too. This is how we kill time day after day, staring at that boring, good-for-nothing TV. Oh, here the two of you are. An elderly nurse said that as she rushed towards us. From what I'd seen of the nurse's station, she was apparently the charge nurse of 7F. Well, Miss Satsumi, any fever? I'm fine, no fever. Satsumi. So, that was her name. You really shouldn't be moving around like this. Do you understand? Everyone's worried about you. Well, whatever. Come now, what kind of answer is that? Ah, children these days. The nurse continued to scold and henpeck for some while longer, and the girl named Satsumi, just pretended not to notice at all. Excuse me. She simply stared forward at that boring TV, paying that fussy nurse as little heed as she could. I'll be coming later to draw some blood, okay? With those words, the charge nurse went back to her nurse's station. Hey, well, mind if I call you Satsumi? I asked this as I stared at her white vinyl ID bracelet, at the blood type and the name written therein. Is something the matter, Satsumi? Why are you calling me that? Huh? You're younger than me. Hey, why am I younger than you? Nothing. That's just what I thought is all. It wasn't that I was offended that she called me younger than her. It was just that no matter how I looked, I thought I was 5 to 6 years older than she was. That's why I took out my driver's license from my breast pocket and handed it to her directly. See, I may not seem like it, but I'm 20. So you're younger after all. She only took a glance at my license before handing it back to me. I don't really get what you're saying. It doesn't really matter. I'm just a little older than you are, that's all. She murmured, as expressionless as ever. Her eyes were fixed on that boring TV, all right, but it also felt as if she was gazing at something far away. After they'd taken my AM vital signs, I snuck past the nurses and boarded the elevator. When I got to 1F, I walked out of the outpatient clinic doors and walked outside of the hospital. My goal was the place that I'd been told about not long ago, the faraway B station, not the nearby A station. It wasn't that I wanted to escape or anything. At 7F or at home, none of us died anywhere else. That's what I'd been told. And this B station, which this girl Satsumi had apparently been to many times. That's why, at least just once, I wanted to see this place with my own eyes. It's not as if there's going to be any guard on duty. Even so, we were inhabitants of 7F, different from other inpatients. And thinking of vague maybes so early in the morning, I headed towards that station. My leg settled into a lazy gait as I glanced sidelong at the people commuting to school or work. After about 25 minutes of this, I arrived in front of the station, roughly 4 bus stops away when I calculated it out. Wow, there are a lot of people here, was my first impression of the B station. I stood out a bit because I was in pajamas, but I felt that if I could just buy a subway ticket, I'd be able to go anywhere, no question about it. I still had no idea why I'd been told to go to B station and not the A station, but it looks as if it would be easy to escape if I really wanted to. She must have come here many times herself, so why did she remain on 7F right now? The station in the early morning. I stood there thinking these thoughts as I watched the people rapidly pass by me. That night, after lights out, bored of manga and unable to sleep, I wandered through the hospital alone. Certainly it wasn't supposed to be allowed after lights out, but B of 7F had a peculiar kind of liberty. So in the presence of no light, in the pitch-black stillness of the lounge, that was where I found her. Hey, have you been looking outside today? Yeah. The darkened interior. She did not answer me, but she continued to stare out the window as if she had not. I immediately launched into what happened today. Oh, by the way, I went out to the station today. The B station, just as she taught me. I see. But her response did not change. I thought that she'd react with something because she'd been there before too. But now that I think about it, did the fact that she was here mean that she had no intention of escaping in the first place? I'm going to be going home soon. What? She opened her mouth abruptly, and spoke as if she'd seen right through me. But next time will be the 3rd time, so we may not see each other again. Yeah, I guess. Probably what she was talking about was a temporary discharge from the hospital. She told me that nobody was discharged from 7F more than 3 times. Unlike the elderly, given the progress of our diseases, this meant all the more to young people like us. Here, we may not see each other again, was filled with that kind of meaning. Oh, which one have you decided on? Decided on? Where you're going to die. When that word death came up so abruptly, I was at a total loss for words. I don't know, I haven't thought about it yet. I see, It's just your first time, after all. She murmured, looking desolate. Certainly, it wasn't as if I was going to exist here forever. Just like everyone else, I would be admitted and discharged, slowly grow weak, and someday, I would have to choose in the end. Here on 7F, or at home, surrounded by those fake smiles. I don't want to die at home. But I don't want to die here either. Then what will you do? I guess the only thing is to go somewhere while I still have the strength to. Somewhere you can't beat. This girl who was staying here on 7F when she could have escaped at anytime she wanted. When I thought of that, do you have any other place to go? Do you want to stop me? What? Or do you want to come with me? Well, no, that wasn't what I was thinking about. Then don't ask. She was staring out the window as she spoke, dispassionate, not looking at me once, the same as ever. But then, and just then, her usual expressionless face looked so very sad to me. I was a newcomer to 7F, just recently taught that the third discharge was the last, and she was a girl who soon was to be discharged for the second time. I still did not feel anything real about what was happening to me. But would I too come to wear such a face someday? The rain at morning twilight. Sometimes sleet, sometimes snow, all was coming down. And I was sitting there watching TV in my usual place. 7F felt as devoid of people as it always had. Anything interesting? No, completely boring. She walked to my side. Saying no more, she sat down in the chair next to me. And that was how we began watching TV on this very day as well. She was probably in the same boat as me. Nothing else to do. Nothing we could do. Oh. I'd never seen her respond to the TV before. Is something the matter? Not really. Those were her usual words, but her response was anything but usual. And I looked at the screen, interested in anything that could move her so. There were nature scenes being displayed on TV, beautiful hills and dales burgeoning with trees and flowers, and a vast spread of white flowers in the midst. I remembered those flowers from somewhere. They looked very similar to the white flowers that decorated the windowsills. Could those be the same flowers? You know, the same ones as over there. I pointed to the flowers by the window and said this. No. Huh? Really? They're of the same variety, but they're not strictly the same. She glanced at the flowers by the window for a second, and then went back to gazing at the TV. She told me that they were different, but I couldn't see the distinction between the two. And it meant nothing to me whether flowers were the same or different. But what did mean something was this girl who usually never said a word more than she needed to. She was conversing in rare form today, which is why I decided to follow along. Do you happen to know about them? Flowers, that is. Not really. Really? But I don't see the difference. The flowers on the screen and the flowers in the vase to her side. I continued to talk as I stared vacantly at the two. Look, are these orchids or lilies? See, they're pure white, right? I had no interest, yet I kept trying to make conversation. But she resumed her silence soon enough. And with her usual lack of expression, she continued to stare at the boring TV screen. And just when I turned back to the TV, resigned to the fact that I'd get nothing more out of her, Narcissus. What? Those are Narcissus. As she answered, she turned to face me for the first time. Her hip-length hair swaying, she pointed at the TV screen and looked at me. The ID bracelet on her wrist was white. Her skin was white, just like the flowers on the screen. And I swore I could see a tiny smile on that face that was looking at me for for the first time. A few days later, plunging further into the depths of winter, during this time that the rest of the world called exam period, we were sitting watching TV, the same as ever. This is boring. So it is. This exchange that could not even be called a conversation. We'd spent all our days in this fashion, killing time without meaning or purpose. Speaking of which, when is it for you? Today. I see, so it's today. That word, that today, was the temporary discharge that she alerted to earlier. So we may not see each other again. Yeah, I guess that's true. Because even if she were to be admitted to 7F, that would be her last time. And in that time, I'd probably be discharged and readmitted myself. It didn't seem likely that things could be timed so that we could see each other again. Have you decided yet? About where I'm going to die? Yeah. No, not yet. I see. She nodded somewhat sadly, the expression of someone being discharged for the second time. I still felt nothing about the situation, and I hadn't heard from the doctors about my first discharge. Come to think of it, I wondered if she'd finally decided what her own answer to the dilemma would be. Satsumi, everything's set. A lady came up to us with these words. This was probably her mother. She nodded slightly at me. I did not rise. We'll be leaving soon, but are you all ready? Yeah. Well, have a nice day, sir. She nodded slightly at me again, then turned to leave this place. She did stretch her hand out toward that girl who was likely her daughter. But the girl did not move at all. She stayed rooted in her chair even after her mother had grabbed her hand. What's wrong, Satsumi? It hurts a little. What? Where? Your chest? Your abdomen? My chest. Stay right here. I'll call the doctors right away. She took off, in the visitors' used slippers, in a sprint, towards the nurse's station. There were but two things left in this place, her and me, both in chairs. I did not know a thing about her disease or its status. The only thing I knew were courtesy of her white ID bracelet. Her name was Satsumi, and her blood type was O. We were inhabitants of 7F, and she was older than me, if just by a little. Hey, do you want to lie down over there until the doctors come? I pointed at the corner of the lounge at the couch, at something I had never seen used. It'll support your back after all. Doesn't matter. I'm fine now. Saying those words and nothing more, she stood up quickly. Hey, wait! Don't do anything foolish. But she was already halfway down the corridor before I could finish the sentence. Nightfall, after lights out. Bored of reading manga as usual, I wandered through the darkened hospital. The usual lounge, now pitch black from the absence of light. That was where I found her. Hey, so you're still here? Yeah. What's up? Not feeling well again? Not really. Was all she said as she stared out the window. So her discharge had been postponed after all. No one knew when the next chance would come, but it would probably be weeks from now, not days. Hey, could it be that you feigned illness today? No, that probably wasn't the right way to put it. See, you couldn't say that we weren't sick all the time. What I'm saying is, you didn't want to leave the hospital, did you? I don't know what you're talking about. Because there's no afterwards for you now. But there was no answer to my question in her silence. She had asked me so many times before about where I wanted to die. And it had always been that I didn't know yet, and she didn't want to die at home or here on 7F. So you have no other place to go after all. And what of it? No, nothing. This familiar lounge, flooded in darkness. Her familiar stance, looking out the window with so much, her familiar stance, looking out the window without so much as acknowledgement to my existence. This place we called the hospital, and its extinguished lights, in spite of the fact that it was only 11 p.m. or so. This was the tangent point between what was normal and what was not. On top of that, we were inhabitants of 7F, bereft of any choice to save one: death on 7F or death at home. The outside world that she was staring at from the pitch black height of 7F, that normal world. The buildings and homes were still radiant with light, and the streets overflowed with people going home. And although my awareness of it was still vague, I was already an inhabitant of 7F, already in a normal existence. There was no longer any way for me to go back to that other world, was there now? My time is at a standstill. I'd spent so many seasons, so many white overcast skies, without the want or need to converse with anybody. At first I would look down at the healthy kids going to school and the people walking back and forth on the streets. And when I got tired of that, I always watched TV. Nothing else to do. Nothing else I could do. Even when there was snow outside the window, it was always bright and sunny inside the TV. A dream world, stretching out before my eyes without heat, without cold, without pain. I sought comfort from my imagination. And so I amassed a huge knowledge base. Meaningless trivia upon meaningless trivia, over and over. And before I knew it, nothing that appeared on TV seemed real anymore. And in quick succession, it also happened to books, games, and then my family. Finally, I was unable to view myself as anything real, as if I were staring at scenes of another person's life. That's why I was not surprised, even when they transferred me to 7F. If I closed my eyes, the world would always vanish. So I thought I'd be fine, as I did as I thought. And soon enough, my second discharge from the hospital. By the time of my next admission, I'd probably be too weak to stand by myself. I found my own self, the one who couldn't do anything even though she knew this to be pitiful. I found my own self, the one who had no destination to be ridiculous. My time is at a standstill, my heart at a standstill, my chest standing still with huge scars. I'd lived for 22 years now, and I found myself utterly helpless. January 19th, 2005, 7F. A few days after that, the overhanging clouds had cleared up, and an endless winter sky was in their place. Oddly enough, my father had come to visit, a difficult expression on his face the entire time. But he was saying something or other about my insurance, and at that time his eyes were not unhappy at all. I have to talk to the doctors for a bit. Saying this, my father strode down the corridor, toward that dim conference room where this had all began, or so it seemed. My hospital room was now empty. Having nothing to do now, I reached for the weekly magazines that they'd bought at the stands for me. And accompanying them, just as ever, were the fruits and drinks and get-well gifts. And to one side of the basket of that fruits were piled in, right in front of the melons that I so hated. What I saw was a set of car keys. The keys shone silver. Those were the keys to my father's pride and joy, the coupe that he'd sweated over from the upholstery on outwards, the coupe that I'd asked to borrow a long time ago, and then I'd been told no without a single second delay, and my still unused driver's license in the breast pocket of my pajamas. Even after it had lost its chance to use that day, it remained with me, waiting, as if it were its proof of life. In silence, I grabbed the keys. It happened as if on impulse. I had no idea what my motives were either. I just seized them without a second thought, as if I were looking at a scene on TV. And the few days' worth of meds that had been dispensed, I stuffed those into a bag and I headed down the corridor. I snuck past the nurse's station and quickly strode towards the elevators. A bag in my right hand, the keys in my left, the long neglected driver's license in my breast pocket. In front of the lounge, and the next thing I saw was the girl sitting there watching TV as usual, staring blankly and bored at that screen, sitting on a little foldable chair. Hey, that show any good? Does it look like that way to you? No, not at all. The all too expected exchange. Her eyes looked as far away as they'd always had. Well then, shall we go together? What? I continued talking as I showed her the keys in my hand. See, I don't want it to be at home. And I don't want it to be on 7F either. Well then, shall we get going? Shall we go together? Okay. With that, she stood up from her chair. Her hair swayed with her and grazed the tip of my nose. And then she too stuffed a few days' worth of meds in a bag. And we made to leave 7F together. I switched off that boring TV. The grating laughter of the MSC was forever obliterated. Both of us in pajama clad boarded the elevator, heading down from this top floor down to 1F. At 1F we headed not for the ER entrance, but for the outpatient clinic entrance. Whoosh. The cold winter air struck away at our faces, all the more strong in a wide open space like the parking lot. The two of us wandered around the spacious field, looking about ourselves with unease. And after a while, we came across my father's car. The silver coupe. My father's pride and joy, impeccably maintained. I immediately inserted the key and opened the door. Go ahead, get in. Very well. I sank into the driver's seat. She was in the passenger seat, but she was so short that she'd have a hard time seeing the road. I turned the key into the ignition and stepped lightly on the accelerator, just as I'd learned during training. Reassuring engine noises filtered into the cabin. I released the handbrake and then applied the clutch. Now we could go anywhere. That was our plan. Alright, let's go. Okay. She nodded slightly. Instead of replying, I shifted into second gear, and the car accelerated smoothly. Unused to the clutch, and swerving slightly, I advanced slowly. You're swerving. Yeah, it's my first time in a car. Well, it's the first time since I got my license that I've driven a car. I see. The exit to the parking lot was now in view, and the largest road beyond it, without traffic lights. I turned onto it. The sound of honking car horns, those were directed at me as I cut into the road. The silver coupe complained, but did not stop as I worked the unfamiliar clutch, the stiff gearbox. I must have really rubbed the other drivers the wrong way, as the honking of horns did not seem likely to cease. But just as I continued to drive without caring much, none of it quite seemed that real at all. Hey, what is it? Are you scared? Do you want me to be? No, not really. Still before noon, the high-flying sun, the skies of January, above and beyond the windshield, skies so blue they seemed almost as if in morning. We had no destination. On that cold day with an alien clutch and a swerving car, on that day when we drove onto the highway in our pajamas, on that very day of winter. January 19th, 2005. Ibaraki Mito Highway. Around when that blazing high sun had changed into a dusky orange. We were continuing to drive, just driving in any direction at random, and in a place that I did not recognize. We stopped for a bit. Okay. I finally brought the car to a halt. A roadside somewhere, far away from civilization. No traffic anywhere to be seen. Lonely. Having stopped the car in this nameless place, I started inspecting around the cabin. If there was anything useful here. We'd just run off without any preparation at all, but there was something troubling him leaping out at me. With that on my mind, I scoured the dashboard. there's nothing here at all. A couple hundred yen cluttered around the gear stick, a few manga volumes, and a cheap disposable camera. It wasn't as if we had a destination, but the onboard GPS navigation looked broken. And I only had about 8,000 yen on me. That was all the money I had lying around when I up and left. So combined with the pocket change I'd found, I'd only have 9,000 yen or so. Of course, I hadn't really expected there to be anything in the car anyway, but this lack of money presented a problem. It wouldn't be possible for us to find lodging on this budget. And it didn't seem likely that this girl would have any money on her either. Is something the matter? No, it's nothing. Whatever. I'd have expected this from the beginning. It wasn't as if I'd thought this through enough to have things like a plan or a schedule. I just wanted to get out, right then and there. I did not want to stay where I was. Underneath the curtain of twilight, I started up the silver coupe again. Hey, are you hungry? I asked her as I drove along. Come to think of it, she hadn't eaten anything since morning. Want to stop at a convenience store or something? No. Hey, don't be like that. And the food's much better than anything up on 7F. She did not respond to me. Instead, she looked straight down at the pink pajamas she was wearing. Oh, yeah, that's right. I looked down at my own clothing. Sure enough, in these pajamas, we'd be conspicuous no matter where we went. Not that we weren't conspicuous now. In any case, we'd have to do something about them. And having made my decision, I steered back towards civilization. After a little more driving, we arrived in a place whose name I didn't know. Probably somewhere close to the rail station. Certainly enough people around for it to be the case. There's got to be one around here somewhere. I looked around anxiously as I drove, my back pitched a little forward, not touching the seat. Ah, there one is. At last, the coin laundromat. It looked pretty run down from the outside, on the first floor of a small, forlorn building. This was as good a place as any. I stopped the car not far from the entrance to the place. All right, I'll be back in a second. Leaving her and her confused face in the car, I walked into the laundromat. My nose was filled with the smell of bleach and detergent the moment the automatic doors opened. The exterior of the laundromat had told no lie. The washers and dryers were old and run down as well. There's nobody here. The empty laundromat swallowed my whole murmured words. Only a single dryer was in operation, making its characteristic humming noises. I immediately walked to that machine and checked its timer. It looked like it would operate for 30 minutes on 200 yen, and only 5 minutes had elapsed so far. Whoever it was had probably gone elsewhere to kill some time. Ruminating over this, I looked around just one more time to reassure myself that no one was around. Then, satisfied I was all alone, I put my hand in the door handle of that drying machine, and I abruptly opened it. Its door opened during operation. The dryer spun down to a forced halt. I pulled out a clump of half-dry clothing, ignoring the heat and the humidity. After looking around once more to make sure no one was around, I walked out of the laundromat, just like that. Oh. She sounded slightly surprised when she saw my arms full of clothing. But I threw the clothes in the back of the seat without a word. Alright, let's go. I looked back at the bundle of clothes with the steering wheel in one hand. Godly-looking sweaters and jeans and almost nothing else. All in pretty big sizes at that. And still wet. But the car's heating would dry them out soon. Change into whatever you like later. She didn't react much to those words either. She just looked at the back of the pile of clothes. Look, we had no choice. I know. Well, obviously, it wasn't as if I liked doing this kind of thing. And it wasn't as if there was anything I was saving that money for. It was just that the given amount we had, it would be very difficult to buy new clothes. After I'd driven for a bit, around when the moon shone full above us, I stopped the car next to some public park. Probably a place for children to play, tucked away in a corner of a residential area. And there, I started looking through the clothes I'd stolen some time back. They were mostly dry now, thanks to the heating in the car. All men's clothing, after all. I inspected the heap once more, a veritable mountain of gaudy jeans and sweaters. probably someone around my age, around the same size, looked like. And sitting in the driver's seat of the car, I changed into a pair of jeans and a sweater. Hey, you should get changed too. They're all too big. Then will you go on wearing pajamas forever? Fine. She answered reluctantly, grabbed some jeans and other clothes, and opened the door. Hey, where are you going? To get changed. And just like that, she started walking to the park's bathroom. Hey, that was fast. She'd come back in short order. Pink pajamas that she'd been wearing in her hands, a white shirt, and a pair of jeans over her body. Well, that turned out fairly well. No answer. I'd expected this, but everything was too big and baggy on her. The jeans were too long and rolled far up the cuffs, and the sleeves of the shirt were much the same way. The pajamas were better. Come now, don't say that. It's a little warmer this way, at least. She made only a slightly dissatisfied face at my words. Oh, is that it? Were you hoping for more girlish clothes? Not really. The same response as ever. I was sure that she was unhappy with her baggy shirt, but she soon returned to her usual lack of expression. It had begun to rain all of a sudden. A freezing rain falling from the frigid January sky as if it had forgotten how to stop. The countless raindrops spattering on the windshield and obscuring the view from the inside. And when each grew too large for the surface tension to hold up, a few of them gathered, slid down, became rivers. And these rivers swallowed up raindrops underneath them and ran to the bottom. I stared emptily at the rain from the inside. A parking lot somewhere, a desolate place in the middle of the mountains. Having finished shopping at a convenience store, we were spending the night here. The dinner menu: 2 rice balls, 500 milliliters Pocari Sweet, half-bag potato chips. It had been a long time since we did anything like this. Yeah, she murmured with a convenience store rice ball in one hand. It wasn't anything of wonderful quality, but it was far better than anything served up on 7F. And we were both going after the bag of potato chips. She suddenly stopped reaching for it. Is something the matter? Not really. But her eyes were turned up past the windshield, glazed by the rain. A few white flowers on the roadside. Had some flowers soaked by rain. I didn't know if someone had planted them or if they were wild, but I remembered something about them. Those were the Narcissu. Those are Narcissus. Oh, right, Narcissus. While I didn't know flower names at all that well, I'd at least heard of Narcissus before. And this girl, who seldom spoke a single word, was actually talking about something. So I followed along. And speaking of which, are these not exactly the real deal as well? Yeah, something like that. Huh, so they must be pretty rare then. Not really, you can find them anywhere. Anywhere? And where exactly? It wasn't as if I had any deep purpose in asking. It was just that I was making conversation as best I could. And yet, this girl thought about it for a bit, and slowly opened her mouth. West. West? Awaji Island. It's famous for them. Awaji Island? Hey, wait. How far away do you think that is? I just started driving a car, so I wasn't even halfway proficient yet. It was probably about 700 kilometers away, and even on the tollways, I couldn't say how long it would take. And in the first place, I didn't think we had enough money for that. If we went by normal highways instead of the tollways, there was no way we'd have enough for gas. Hey, don't say stuff like that. You can't mean to go there, right? Who said I wanted to go? What? I just answered your question. And just like that, she went back to staring at the flowers across the windshield. The thick haze of the cold rain streaming on glass. She kept gazing and gazing and gazing. I didn't particularly want to go there either, but I had nowhere else I wanted to go. My time was at a standstill. I piled useless trivia upon trivia, drew information from the TV and the TV alone. and soon nothing was real anymore, fading away into hollow space. But I loved looking at maps. Trains, cars, I love things that could take me places. I spread out maps on the top of my narrow bed, changing routes over and over and over. Sedans, coupes, convertibles, rode on so many different kinds of cars. The number one route, continuing on forever. I ran on that road forever and ever. Indigo blue skies, beautiful coastlines. I ran until I came at last to one of these places, sketched in my dreams. Slowly tracing past the arc of a cape, running on the white sand of a beach, the sun to my back. If I but closed my eyes, I could go anywhere. Toward landscapes that I have never seen with my own eyes, longing for the soil upon which I could never have hoped to tread. My useless stockpile of trivia was the only thing that increased. All emptiness, all colors of yearning. January 21st, 2005. The sky after the rain. The high flying clouds streaming by at knife-edge speeds, the unique swishing sound of tires on wet asphalt. And through it all, there we were, driving along as always. No destination, just the desire to keep going, no matter what. It wasn't as if I was looking to go to Awaji Island at all. We didn't even have the gas money to get there anyway. I just drove straight ahead on unfamiliar roads, as though I thought these thoughts. But where are we? I was forced to wonder. I didn't know my geography very well to begin with, and I was seeing all sorts of place names I didn't recognize. I had planned on driving unto the ends of the earth, but with the GPS navigation system broken, I had no idea anymore. But before I knew it, I started looking around anxiously at the street signs as I drove. I don't know at all. But, well, I don't know where we are right now. She'd said something to me, and I'd given her a casual response. Because she probably wasn't going to know even if I asked her. Aruma District, Saitama Prefecture. What? The next right leads to number 16 route, towards Sachuchi. You knew all this? Did you happen to live around here or something? No, nothing like that at all. It was a surprise. No, it wasn't just surprising, it was nothing short of a miracle that she knew the roads to this detail. Because no matter how I looked at it, she didn't seem to have driven around all that much herself. Then, could it be... Do you know the way from here to Awaji Island? I don't understand why you're asking. Well, see, we might be able to get there on normal highways without having to get on the tollways. And we might just have enough gas money to get us there. Do you want to go there? Well, no, that's not what I meant. Then don't ask me. With those words, she fell silent. And she turned to face the window with as frosty a demeanor as ever. But she wasn't looking at the passing scenery. It felt as if she was staring at something in the unreachable distance. Her, then don't ask me. Just what the hell was that supposed to mean? How would she have replied if I told her that I was planning on going? We simply continued on. No purpose, no aim. It wasn't as if we had a plan or schedule from the get-go. We just didn't want to die on 7F or at our oh-so-fake homes. But, and maybe I alone, must have wanted something to show us the way, no matter what that way might be. January 22nd, 2005. It's cold. So it is. Some beach whose name I did not know. We reached the sea before we'd known it. I'd been planning on heading west, but somehow it looked like I'd ended up going south. A pitch black sky and a cold, windy waterfront. We both got out of the car and stared at the darkened sea. She stood apart from me as usual and stared into the distance, where the black sky and ocean melted into the horizon's edge. And after seemingly taking into the view of the ocean for a while, she slowly started walking towards the beach. Hey, what do you think will happen? Now, I've got no idea what you're talking about. Do you think I'd be able to die at peace if I just walked into the sea? Those were her words. As she slowly walked into the sands, her back turned to me. The third time was the end. There was no fourth time. The choice was between dying on 7F and dying at home. Apparently, no one had escaped this choice. Those were the words that she herself had spoken to me. And yet, on her second time around, she told me that she didn't want to die on 7F or at home. This was after she'd explained the rules to me, after her duty to me was already over. That's why I felt that this was what she meant. I don't know, I've never drowned before. And if I walk into the sea right now, would you stop me? She turned her head to look at me as she said this, with the moon rising in the dark heavens as her backdrop, and her gaze, which had always been so far away, was directed straight at me. I don't know. I'd have to see when the time came. I guess so. She then turned her back to me and slowly started walking towards the sea once more. Hey, tell me, what is it? Do you want to be stopped? Upon hearing my words, she stopped short of the waves. A strong wind kicked up a spray that beat against her feet. If you want to be stopped, then I'll stop you. Not really. That's not it at all. Then it'll be fine if I don't stop you, right? There was no reply to my question, but her feet did not move any farther either. So that was her answer then and there. The high heavens of winter, blue and clear, almost to the point of morning. Strong north winds beating against the electric wires overhead. A silver coupe reflecting that blue sky on its shining frame, with me at its wheel and with her in the passenger seat as per usual. I didn't know where this was, but the real problem was that we were going to run out of gas soon. We didn't have that much money to begin with, and after various convenience store purchases, we had even less. Only about 7,000 yen left. Of course, I had no idea how many liters this car took, but we probably had enough to fill the tank once. We still didn't really have a destination or anything, but if we didn't fill up, we could not go anywhere anymore. I'm going to fill up on gas. I see. And with that, I turned the steering wheel and drove into a gas station that was coming into view. Welcome. Will you be paying by credit card or cash? Cash, please. Regular or premium? Regular or premium? I had no idea. Well, then again, I had no idea about anything in this car. And on top of that, it had been a long time since the driver's license classes. Which one would you like? Well, there was at a loss for words, and there stood the gas station attendant waiting for me. And then, just as I was about to answer at random because I didn't care which one of the two it was, she spoke from the passenger seat. Regular, please. Huh? Oh, okay, regular then. Okay then, regular, full tank. Paying with cash? Yeah, that'll be all. Okay then, thank you very much. The attendant skillfully began his operation with those cheerful words. The strangely disagreeable smell of gasoline wafted in from the window that I'd opened roughly 10 centimeters. Hey, are you sure this thing takes regular? She said nothing at all to this and just pointed at the prices list. Oh, so that was it. It was cheaper this way. I didn't understand it very well, but I didn't think that there was that much of a difference in price. And then I saw the gasoline meter and the number of liters being displayed. 25, 26, 27, 28. Those numbers were going by at incredible speed. Maybe I'd make a mistake. I began to get a little worried as I watched those numbers climb. I told them to fill the tank a while back, but I didn't have that much money on hand. Even with the coins, I only had 7,000 yen, and of course I had no idea how many liters this tank took. And what was I going to do if I didn't have enough money? I did some quick calculations, and I realized that after 60 liters I wouldn't have enough. 38, 39, 40, 41. The numbers keep climbing without slacking pace at all. And I became more and more worried over something I usually didn't give a second thought to. Damn, how many liters does this thing take? I'd let the words out before I knew it. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. Huh? This has a 50-liter tank, see? And just as he said it, the gasoline meter stopped between 47 and 48. The sound of receipt being printed out, and then the attendant at my window again. Thank you for waiting. The total comes to 5,240 yen. Okay, here. I took out a 5,000 yen note and a crumpled 1,000 yen note from my pocket and handed them to the attendant. Alright, then your change comes to 760 yen. Here's your receipt. Thank you for your business. I turned straight onto the road upon hearing the attendant's cheerful voice. The silver coupe, now in motion once more. On the bright side, I was no longer worried about running out of gas. On the not so bright side, we only had about 2,000 yen left. This worried me, but there was something that preoccupied me much more. Hey, question. Could it be that you're an expert on cars, too? Not really. What do you mean, not really? You knew that this car took 50 liters of gas, didn't you? Of course, it may have been that this kind of thing was absolutely common knowledge that I just didn't have. But she'd proven that she was an expert on these roads not so long ago. Having been caught by surprise twice now, I took out the vehicle specification from the glove compartment. And of course, you know the make and model of this car as well, don't you? Is that a question? You can think of it as a quiz if you want. Integra Type R Coupe. Correct. And the specs? 99 model year, 5 speed, max 200 horsepower. I had no expectation that she'd actually answer. I almost involuntarily followed along on the vehicle spec sheet as she rattled off figures with total disinterest. Length 4,380, width 1,695, engine displacement 1,797 cc. Do you want me to go on? No, that's alright. You're correct. I put the vehicle spec sheet back in its place. I couldn't believe my ears, but she nailed every single specification. I didn't think one could just memorize these things, and I couldn't even venture a guess as to why she had. But right before my eyes, she had gotten every single spec correct. And thinking back to the roads and flowers, I was getting the impression that she knew a lot about a lot. Hey, just why do you know so much about everything? It's nothing, it's just that I'm older than you. And with that bare response, she went back to her usual silence. With her staring at the window again, I didn't find myself able to throw any more questions at her. Older. It really didn't look that way at all, but this was something she'd said before. Her name was Satsumi. Her blood type was 0. Those were written on her white ID bracelet. There was very little indication to show me that she was older than me at all. Around when the sun started peeking out from under the clouds, Silver Coupe speeding along. No destination, no place to go, just running forward. No worries about gasoline, but no more money either. Only about 2,000 yen left. Only enough for 3 to 4 days at most of convenience store food. Alright, so now what do you want to do? I have no idea what you mean by that. I mean that we have no more money left. So, look, her appearance was unchanging as ever, and this conversation we were having while eating rice balls bought at a convenience store not long ago. Finally, the fact that even if we were driving along like this, we were using up gasoline little by little. Maybe it might have been better to just stay still without doing anything at all, but it was impossible for me to stay still without doing anything, without shooting for anything. And I kept driving with those feelings at heart. If we just kept driving on normal highways, we'd run out of gas in about 3 days. Likewise, we only had enough for 3 to 4 days of food with the 2,000 yen we had left. We were obviously going to become too poor to do anything soon enough. Hey, do you want to try going to this Awaji island? No reply. She just kept staring out the window as per usual. I think I might want to. Why? Well, it wasn't as if we'd escaped from 7F with any goal or destination in mind, because east or west, no matter where, anything was fine with me. But maybe that's why I wanted a goal and destination, because anything was fine with me. Around when the daylight had given over to the darkness of night, I had stopped the car in the parking lot of the pachinko parlor. Obviously, I wasn't planning on winning any money through pachinko or slots. I knew that there wasn't much I could do on just 2,000 yen alone. but if I were skillful enough, I just might be able to swipe 10,000 or 20,000 yen. That was my guess, based on the many times I'd been to pachinko parlors in the past. If I only had that much, we'd be okay in the first place, and we might even be able to get to Awaji Island on that amount. So I told her about the plan that I had just thought up. How about it? Want to try it out? No. Okay, very well. I'd expected it, but she shot me down immediately. I hadn't hoped that she'd cooperate with me in the first place. And I told her about my plan as a fait accompli, not because I wanted her aid in it. Alright then, wait here. I got out of the car and strode into the pachinko parlor alone. It was more crowded than I thought. Lots of pachinko balls, lots of people, and more importantly, cash boxes crowded everywhere. As good a place as any. And thinking this, I headed over to the slots machines. I inspected them from the corridor for a while, and after having finished my survey, I focused on one set of machines. Lots of middle-aged salarymen, all right. Up to 4 boxes at their feet and up to 2 on racks above them. And an empty stand separating each of them. From what I'd seen before, these men hadn't come with acquaintances or friends. This satisfied their requirements. Perhaps in a place like this, no one would notice if I swiped one of those cash boxes. And in a store like this, each one probably held 20,000 yen or so. And with just that much, I just kept waiting for one of the salarymen to go on the bathroom. Oh man, that hard. Why was the sentence so hard? Probably because I feel like shit. After a little while, after roughly 30 minutes had passed, a salaryman finally stood up from his seat. After I'd tailed him a bit to make sure he was going to the bathroom, I dashed to the back of the stand that he'd occupied. And, watching the people who were hitting the slots and the attendants, I slowly approached that stand. Then, so as not to raise any suspicion, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, I swiped one of those cash boxes underfoot. That moment, coins scattered everywhere with thunderous noise. I'd been meaning to pick it up. No, I really had picked it up, with my very own hands, but they were unable to bear that weight. The cash box crashed to the floor. Everyone turned my direction to see what the commotion was all about. I got the feeling that someone was shouting. I got the feeling that someone was running towards me, but that was all behind me. I had already bolted and less than 2 meters away from the entrance of the establishment by then. Put the engine in ignition in a hurry and floored the pedal. And when I spun the wheels to make my hasty getaway, just then, I'd run against the curb or something as I turned to make my getaway. Thus the horrible crunching sound. But I accelerated onto the road before me without giving it a second thought. My suddenly constricting, out-of-breath chest and the silver coupe speeding out of the daylight and into darkness. I was concerned about the crash a little while ago, but I had to distance myself from that place now. And soon, after 10 minutes of this, a fair distance away from that pachinko parlor, I stopped at some roadside and started to get out to inspect the damage. Are things okay? Yeah, it doesn't look too serious. She sounded slightly worried as she called out to me. I answered her as I inspected the damage. There was just a bump in the rear fender and a small crack in the muffler. It didn't look as bad. It didn't look as if there would be any problem driving this. I let out a sigh, somewhat relieved. That sucked. I thought back at what had just happened at the pachinko parlor. I'd slipped up there, but had I been a little more skillful, I might have pulled it off. And the reason that I wasn't able to hold onto that cash box was because it had been a while since I'd lifted something heavy. If I'd held onto it with all my strength at the outset, I might have been able to make it. So you miscalculated. Huh? The current, you can't do what the former you could have. She spoke as if she'd seen straight through me. But that kind of weight. So it's best not to think of it the same way. Perhaps she was right. I didn't want to admit how changed I was. Fair enough. I hadn't anticipated at all that I could grow this weak. Then what should I do? No answer. Eyes turned in silence towards the window to stare into the dark night sky. This was probably the way she was telling me to give up. Oh my goodness. I had no idea this was so long. Well, anyway, this is Audapostrophe, and you have been mainly listening to Narcissu. No, I have no idea how to say that. This is the Great Depression run, since I am feeling like crap. So I hope you've enjoyed watching. This game is actually free to play. So you can play episodes 1 and 2 for free. And there is also a anniversary edition, which is not free. But depending on how far we get with this, I may pick up that anniversary edition. Anyway, I think I have another game in mind. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I will see you at the next stream.